So we are saying that so absorption of water and mineral salts. The importance of water in plants includes, one, we've said water is a raw material for photosynthesis. Water is broken down. You have talked about light stage and dark stage of photosynthesis, isn't it? What is light stage? When the water molecules are broken down, isn't it? To produce what? Hydrogen and oxygen, isn't it? Where is oxygen taken? Some of the oxygen is used during respiration by the plant, isn't it? But the remaining oxygen is given out to the environment, and the animals use that oxygen for breathing, isn't it? The second function of water, water plays an important role in growth and development. You say the first one is a raw material for photosynthesis. Number two, it is important in plant, isn't it? Growth and development. That means the water is very... Look at this. When the plants take in water, the cells take in water, isn't it? So will the cells become turgid or not turgid? They become turgid. As they become turgid, they harden. And as they harden, if it's in the stem will offer support. And that makes the plant to do what? To expose leaves and flowers. When the plants expose leaves and flowers to the environment, what happens? The leaves can be able to manufacture food, and the plant grows and develops. So water getting taken into the plant, isn't it? And the mineral salts also getting taken into the plant will make the plant to grow and develop. If you don't drink water, do you grow and develop? Imagine. And remember also, water in the plant will offer an environment where reactions will do what? Will take place. One person gives you dry food with no water. Then another one gives you food that has water. Which one will you eat first? With the water. When the food reaches in the body and the water is also in the body, that environment, you see, the water softens the food, making the food to become easily digested. So water is very important during growth and development, during photosynthesis. Number three, water will act as a solvent or liquid. Found? Water will act as a solvent. A solvent in the sense that it will offer a site where reactions will do what? Will take place. A metabolic reaction or a biological reaction cannot occur in the absence of what? Water. So when the water is present, what happens? The water provides what? A medium in which reactions can do what? Can take place. I get the point. Because they'll ask you, tell the function of water. Then you say, oh my goodness, I don't know, I have pressure. Nothing like pressure here. Water is acting as a solvent. Water is acting as a liquid to provide a medium in which reactions can take place. Number three, water. I'm really keeping this. Some of these things are not here. Water will act as a medium in which the solutes can get transported. Is that making sense? Yes. Let me ask you a question. Do you think the mineral salts can get transported in the absence of water? No. So what am I saying? Water will provide a medium in which the solutes can actually be able to get transported. Because we know the mineral salts must first dissolve in the water. After the mineral salts have dissolved in the water, what happens? The mineral salts can now be able to do what? To get transported when they're in the water. Isn't it? Another importance of water. Water provides mechanical support. How? How does the water absorb or actually end up providing mechanical support? How does the water provide mechanical support? The water provides mechanical support by having, what are you looking for? Use this. Are you sure that pen is there? You should be looking for something which is present, not absent. So we've said that water provides mechanical support, isn't it? Do you know why? When the cells absorb water, they become turgid. Hence they are firm and rigid. So when they are firm and rigid, that offers what? Support. Or mechanical support. Try to imagine if the leaves do what? Lose water. What happens? When the leaves lose water, do they fall or they dry? They dry.
They dry.
They dry. After drying, they fall. After falling, is there growth and development? But when the leaves take in water, what happens? The cells of the leaves take in water, they become turgid. Hence they are firm and rigid. When they are firm and rigid, that means that offers support. Lastly, water has a cooling effect. Look at this. When you are sweating, the sweat comes out. That sweat, what has made the sweat to get formed? The heat. So when the sweat evaporates from your skin surface, that sweat is escaping with excess heat. That excess heat is called latent heat of vaporization. So in the process of actually sweating, what happens? Heat is lost. I get the point. So when the heat gets lost, that heat is called latent heat of vaporization. They will ask in the examination, what is the importance of water? You'll say water will actually act as a cooling machine, isn't it? Or water has what you call a cooling effect on the plant. Because when the water is able to get lost in form of water vapor from the plants, what happens? That water vapor is escaping in a lot of heat. Because it was water in the plant, isn't it? But what is escaping? Is it water or water vapor? Water vapor. What made the water in the plant to turn into water vapor? The heat. So when the water vapor escapes, it escapes with what you call latent heat of vaporization. Now let's see. This is what you call an essay question. They'll bring in the examination. Explain the absorption of water. 10 marks. Look at this. Water is drawn into the root hair cells by osmosis. Do you know why? Due to the presence of dissolved substances in the cell sap of the root hairs. Now let me ask a question. Between the concentration of the cell sap of the root hair and the concentration of the surrounding, which one is greater? The one in the root hair or the one in the surrounding?
The one in the root.
The one in the root hair. So water gets drawn in through osmosis across the membrane, isn't it? Across the semipermeable membrane, isn't it? So you can say a concentration gradient therefore exists between the cell sap of the root hair and the surrounding, or in the soil. So this greater concentration of the cell sap exerts what? An osmotic pressure, thus drawing water molecules across the membrane into the root hairs, isn't it? Now, the osmotic pressure exerted by the root hair cells overcomes the water retaining powers of the soil. So that means there is what you call an osmotic pressure, isn't it? That osmotic pressure overcomes the water retaining property of the soil. So that means if the osmotic pressure is greater than the retaining power of the soil, in as far as the water is concerned, is greater, that means the water gets drawn in, isn't it? Now, more water drawn into the root hair dilutes what? The cell sap, making it less concentrated than the adjacent cortex cells. Found? The water gets drawn in, it dilutes the concentration or the salts of the cell sap. This cell sap becomes less concentrated when compared to the adjacent what? Cortex cells. Where am I saying cortex cells? What did I say here? You should be getting the point. This is the root hair. The next is what? The cortex. Found? So it actually enables the cell sap to get diluted. When the cell sap gets diluted, what happens? It becomes less concentrated compared to the what? Compared to the... Yes?
Hii ndo inakuwa nini? Less concentrated.
Si maji imeingia. Kama umeweka chumvi kwa kikombe na umeweka maji kidogo, sio ni concentrated? Ukiongeza maji mingi?
Ni concentrated bado.
Hata hii pia ni essay. Mulio unalala kwa darasa. Nimesema when the water is drawn in through osmosis, the osmotic pressure of the root hair inside this root hair in the cell sap inakuwa lower. That means when the more water enters, what happens? The concentration of the cell sap reduces. Because the water entering the cell sap has what you call a diluting effect. So that means the cell sap is diluted. When the cell sap gets diluted, what happens? When you compare that cell sap and the adjacent cortex, which one has a higher concentration? The cell sap or the cortex? Cortex, because this one has been diluted. So the water moves from the adjacent what? Root hair cells to the cortex. Isn't it? You get the point? So again from the cortex, the region becomes diluted. Then the adjacent what? Cells. What happens? The water moves from one cortex cell to the adjacent cortex, the neighboring cortex cell, the neighboring cortex cell, because of the diluting effect of the previous cortex cell. Isn't it? Until it enters what? The xylem vessels. Located in the center of the what? The root. Look at this. Until it enters, look at this. Until it enters what? The cortex cells. After entering the cortex cells, until it enters what? The xylem vessels. Located in the center. Through the cortex cells. Until it enters what? The xylem vessels. Located where? In the center. Any question? Now, the water is then conducted up the stem through the xylem vessels in the stem. Until the water reaches where? In the leaves. Or in the cortex of the leaves. So the water has to actually pass through these cortex cells until it enters the xylem in the center of the root hair or in the root cell. Okay? From the root cell into the xylem of the stem. From the xylem of the stem into the xylem of the leaves. Hivyo imagine tumaliza. Ni ngumu kweli? Yes, easy. Now, that was uptake of water. We are now going to what we call uptake of mineral salts. Nataka uelewe nani Sabrina? Bana kulala tu kwa darasa ni kama unaelewa kumbe uelewi. Very good. Na
hiyo uptake ni nini? Absorption.
Ya kuchukua nani, leta hiyo ndizi kwanza ndio tuendelee.
Absorption.
Kwa sababu nimevumilia ni kama tumbo inaniuma.
Ni absorption or uptake?
Like you can say absorption or uptake. It means the same thing. Very good. Don't tell her the one who ate, mwambie tu ni kama abdikadir alichukua. Sawa?
Nini?
Mwambie tu abdikadir ndiye alichukua.
Wewe.
Abdikadir.
Newe tu ya abdikadir. Ya abdikadir newe tu.
Ndio strike ya leaf. Ndio hii tunamaliza tu saa hii. Tunachukua tukesoni kama 2-3 hivi tutakuwa tumemaliza hiyo topic. Unajua ndio itakuwa imeisha sasa hapa. Now, look at this. Uptake of mineral salt. Aya, I want to ask a very simple question. Between the soil surrounding the root hair and the root hair, where do you have more mineral salts? Because you're talking about the soil, isn't it?
Yeah.
Plants require mineral salts, yes or no?
Yeah, they require.
They require mineral salts for the growth and
Development.
and even during photosynthesis, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, they must therefore be absorbed into the plant from the soil, isn't it? Generally, the concentration of the cell sap in the root hairs is greater than that in the soil. So the mineral salts therefore enter the root hair cells. Now, I think entering the mineral salts again is a question gland or not. We have said the mineral salts have to be taken into the plant, isn't it? For the proper functioning and growth of the plant, isn't it? The concentration of the mineral salts in the cell sap. Open that door because that person might not until.
Ahmed. Ahmed. ايش هذا شو يجي سنة؟ مكعين. يا رو أحمد. ها. ديني. وهذا ديني أول. كاري تستك. يا؟ أنا أسكت. صبري يا واي. يا صبري. أقول لك.
I'm asking, we are saying between the soil and the root hair cell, or the cells of the root hair cell, where do you have a high concentration of mineral salts?
In the soil.
In the soil. But hapa wanakuambia ni uongo.
Nani?
Hapa kitabu inasema the mineral salts in the cell sap is having a higher concentration than the one in the surrounding.
Si root hair na absorb your mineral salts.
Nasikia root hair ndio iko na mineral salts mingi kuliko nje. Kwa sababu tayari ilikuwa imeabsorb, zimefanya ni zimejaa. So kumaanisha there's a higher concentration of what? Mineral salts in the cell sap than the surrounding. Isn't it? Now, are the salts going to move against a concentration gradient or not against a concentration gradient? Against concentration gradient. Because inside there's a higher concentration, outside a lower concentration. Okay?
Concentration gradient means
a difference in concentration, like between a highly concentrated region and a lowly concentration gradient. Look, ukichora hivi ni curve.
Gradient nini?
So tunasema change in y over change in x.
Hiyo nini?
Ati hiyo ni nini? Amekuja bangi asubuhi.
Wala gradient ni nini?
Change in y over change in x.
Hiyo y na x nini?
Si ni kwa Cartesian plane.
X, y.
Unaona hapa?
Maana usiandike kwa kitabu.
Kitabu yako iko wapi?
Ndio video amechukua changu. Sitachukua makala na mimi. Yeye ndio amechukua kitabu yako. Sitachukua.
Now, we've said if someone says concentration gradient, that means a difference in concentration. Like unapata hapa ni 80% concentrated, hapa ni 60% concentrated. Difference is 2. So this is what we call concentration gradient. A difference in what? Concentration gradient. So that means the outside has a lower concentration of mineral salts, the inside has a higher concentration of mineral salts. So the mineral salts enter the root hairs through what you call active transport against a concentration gradient. Okay? So mineral ions whose concentration is higher in the soil solution than the root hair cells are taken up by. Now look at this. That means the uptake of mineral salts can occur in how many ways? 2 ways. Active transport or diffusion.
Osmosis.
Not osmosis. Achana osmosis iko na pressure.
Hii absorption of water.
Hiyo ni osmosis. Mineral salts na water ni tofauti. Water osmosis. Mineral salts active transport na diffusion.
Oh, umeelewa mineral salts.
Oh, very good yeah. Now, sikiza vizuri. Chai inanuma. Sikiza vizuri. Aita aplikatara kuja ndio niende KDF. Sikiza vizuri. When you have this, acha nianze kwanza biology. When you have this, you should note this. You should note that the outside has a higher concentration of mineral salts. The inside has a low concentration of mineral salts. So will the mineral salts enter by diffusion or active transport?
Active transport.
Listen to the question again. The outside has a higher concentration, the inside has a lower concentration.
Oh.
Will the mineral salts enter by diffusion or active transport? Diffusion. But when the outside has a lower concentration of mineral salts and the inside has a higher concentration of mineral salts, the mineral salts enter by active transport. That means the mineral salts are entering against a Cohesion gradient. Yani ndani iko mingi, nje iko kidogo. Inafaa bado iingie. So inaingia against a gradient.
Kama huko ni mingi na ndani ni ndogo.
Tumesema kama hapa ni 70 na hapa ni 10, moving from a region of high to a region of low. Hiyo ni diffusion. But kama hapa nje ni 10 na hapa ni 70.
Movement of molecules from the region of low concentration to the region of high concentration.
Hiyo ni nini?
From the region of high concentration to the region of low concentration.
Very good. But hapa tumesema kama ni high to low, diffusion. Low to high, active transport. Na hiyo inaitwa against a gradient. So after absorption, if they actually reach here, what happens? This region becomes highly concentrated with the mineral salts. What happens? The mineral salts move through diffusion from region of high concentration in the cell sap to the cortex. region of low concentration. They move from one cell to another in the cortex until they reach where? In the xylem, at the center of the root. Then from the center of the xylem of the root into the xylem of the stem, until they reach in the xylem of the what? The leaf. Imagine. Yeah. So they are carried up the water, isn't it? Through which
absorption.
watakwambia explain absorption of water. Unaeleza hivyo.
Unasema nini?
Like how are you going to?
Si tumeeleza hapa.
Unaweka aje short notes like?
Si tumesema unaanza kwanza, the water molecules are taken into the root hair through osmosis across the semipermeable membrane of the root hair. Because the surrounding is lowly concentrated and the cell sap is highly concentrated. Sikiza vizuri. Sikiza vizuri. In the soil, the region is lowly concentrated. In the cell sap of the root hair, the region is highly concentrated. Umeelewa kufika hapo? Water molecules are drawn into the root hair cell through osmosis across the semipermeable membrane of the root hair cell. Sawa sawa? The water drawn into the root hair cell has a diluting effect on the concentration of the cell sap of the root hair cell. Hence, when the cell sap is diluted, the concentration actually drops. Then the neighboring cortex cells end up having a higher concentration. So what is drawn from the cell sap of the root hair into the cortex cells, okay, through osmosis. Then the water drawn into the cells of the cortex have what you call a diluting effect on the cortex cells. That means again water moves to the adjacent cortex cells through osmosis. From one cortex cell to another through osmosis, from one cortex cell to another through osmosis, until the water reaches the xylem vessel in the center of the root. Then the water now is taken up the xylem of the stem. Sawa. So you can say the water moves up the xylem of the stem through what? Osmosis. Until the water reaches in the xylem of the leaf. Hiyo ni ngumu kueleza. Nikasema nini? With the mineral salts in the soil, there's a low concentration of mineral salts. Kwanza unasanga hivi, the plants need mineral salts for their growth and functioning. Okay? You get the point?
Yes.
The surrounding or in the soil, the concentration of the mineral salts can be lower. Then in the cell sap of the root hair, the concentration of the mineral salts can be higher. So you can say the mineral salts get taken in through what? Through active transport. When the soil has a low concentration and the root hair has a higher concentration, we use active transport. But when the surrounding has a higher concentration and the inside has a low concentration, mineral salts are taken in through what we call diffusion. When the mineral salts actually accumulate in the cell sap ends up having a higher concentration. So the neighboring cortex cells have a low concentration of mineral salts. The mineral salts are taken into the cortex cells through what? Diffusion. So mineral salts are carried from one cortex cell to another through a diffusion until the mineral salts reach in the xylem at the center of the root. The mineral salts are actually able to get taken up by the xylem vessel in the stem until they reach in the xylem of the leaves. Using which processes? Osmosis, diffusion, root pressure, and capillary attraction. I've said the water now and the mineral salts move up the xylem of the stem until they reach in the xylem of the leaves. Through which processes? Osmosis, diffusion, root pressure, and capillary attraction. Kuna swali? Naona paka nimeimprove, nimenunua simu. You should clap for the teacher. Kwani unaiona aje?
Oja hivi. The other side.
This is my brother and her daughter.
My brother and her daughter.
My brother and his daughter.
Amevunja leo tu.
Nimevunja.
Wani ndiongo hiki ni old.
Bana. Nimetoka kwa box unasema ni oil. Now, transpiration. The process by which plants lose water in the form of what? Water vapor into the atmosphere. Plants lose water in form of water vapor into the atmosphere. Now, the loss of water in plants occurs in three sites. Occurs in three what? Sites. Number 1, in the stomata. Number 2, in the lenticel. Number 3, in the cuticle. So if the water gets lost through the stomata, the lenticel, and the cuticle, that means there are three main types of what? Transpiration. We have what we call stomatal, cuticular, and lenticular. Through the lenticel. Stomatal. My friend, let me tell you one thing. 80 to 90% of water is lost through the stomata, found in the leaves.
Stomata, cuticle, na?
Lenticular. Lenticel. Now, 80 to 90% of water is lost through what? The stomata. Stomata zikiwa nyingi, ikiwa moja inaitwa stoma. Stoma is one. Stomata in plural. Pressure naonganga tu kwa simu hivi the whole day. Very good. Now, the stomata are found where? On the leaves, but may also occur on the epidermis of young herbaceous stems. So that means you can either find the stomata on the leaves or on the stem. Question? Okay. Very good. The next one is what you call cuticular. The loss of water in the form of water vapor through the cuticle. This one accounts up to which percent? 20%. Isn't it? Do you know where the cuticle is found? Look at this. This is the internal structure of a leaf of a plant. The upper part is called the cuticle. Then upper epidermis. Then palisade mesophyll. Then spongy xylem phloem. If it's one open, it's called stoma. Many stomata. The lower is actually called the lower epidermis. Then this is the cuticle. So the loss of guard cell ni hii na hii. Sawa? So plants also lose water through what you call the cuticle. Now if the cuticle is thick, do plants lose excess water or not lose excess water?
Not lose
Excess water. Cuticle is actually thick in plants found in the desert. Now we always say the loss of water through the cuticle is negligible. Unajua meaning of negligible?
Sometimes.
Not sometimes. It's actually a small amount of water, not a large amount of water. So it becomes negligible. Sometimes ni yako.
I mean, it always sometimes.
No, hiyo ni yako. Now,
Yeah.
now the loss of water through the lenticel is called lenticular.
Maya. Ana ukeena iska daa. Ana cunto ukeena iska daa.
The loss of water through the lenticel is called lenticular. Like I can come here and draw this as my stem. Then when you go to the stem, the cells can get loosely packed. Fam? When the cells are loosely packed, they leave an opening called a lenticel. So sometimes also the water can get lost through what you call the lenticel. Okay? What is a lenticel? A lenticel is made up of what you call the loosely packed cork cells found in the stem. Kwa hivyo kwanza leo jua tu cells zinazopatikana kwa stems zinaitwa cork cells. Sometimes these cells can get loosely packed. When they get loosely packed, they leave an opening called a lenticel. That lenticel can allow the passage of water. So the water lost through the lenticel is called lenticular water, and that type of transpiration is called lenticular transpiration. Loosely packed cells on wood stems. The loss of water through the lenticels is negligible. Unajua maana negligible? Tumesema a very small amount can get lost.
Both of them are negligible.
Yeah, lenticular and cuticular. Sometimes. Why did you say sometimes? But the loss of water through the stomata is not sometimes. Is that okay?
Negligible.
Now, look at this. This shows the internal structure of a leaf in figure 1.5 as I've actually been able to get shown here. Isn't it?
Yeah.
The stoma is open. Isn't it? The stoma opens into which layer? The spongy mesophyll. Isn't it? Or the the stoma or this opening, isn't it, open into the substomatal. You know the meaning of substomatal? This is the substomatal air spaces, these ones. The substomatal air spaces. So what am I trying to say? The stoma open into the substomatal air spaces. The stoma open into the substomatal air spaces that are lined with the spongy mesophyll cells. So as water vaporizes from where? The spongy mesophyll cells into the substomatal. Hii inamaanisha maji yanatoka wapi? Kwa spongy, inaenda wapi? Kwa stomatal air spaces. You see how they have shown with the arrows. So first, this is the internal structure of a leaf. Okay, this stoma open into the substomatal air spaces. Okay, the substomatal air spaces are neighboring what? The spongy mesophyll cells. So water first vaporizes from where? The spongy mesophyll cells into the substomatal air spaces.
Huko ndio inaitwa lentis.
Hii ni leaf. Tumesema lentis liko kwa stem muluya. Si ndio? What have I said? This is a stoma. This is a stoma. A single opening of what? A single opening of a leaf. If it's when you say stoma, if the meaning you say stomata. So a stoma or stoma open into the substomatal air spaces. Kwa hivyo ndio inaitwa substomatal air space. Hii nafasi hii. The substomatal air spaces are surrounded by what? Spongy mesophyll cells. Isn't it? So first, the water vaporizes from the spongy mesophyll cells into the substomatal air spaces. Is that okay? After reaching the substomatal air spaces, isn't it? I want to ask a very simple question. Does the cell sap of the spongy mesophyll becomes highly concentrated or lowly concentrated?
Lowly concentrated. Highly concentrated.
Now listen to the explanation first. This is called the stoma. The two they are called stomata. They open into the substomatal air spaces. The substomatal air spaces are surrounded by what? Are surrounded by the spongy mesophyll cells. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So what happens when the water vapor escapes from the spongy mesophyll cells? Where does the water go? Into the substomatal air spaces. So I'm asking, in these spongy mesophyll cells, do we have a higher concentration of water or a lower concentration of water? Lower concentration of water, because the water has actually vaporized and it has entered where? The substomatal air spaces. So do we have a higher concentration of salts in the spongy or a lower concentration of salts?
A high concentration of salt.
Very good. Higher concentration of salts. Nani, sometimes anasema lower. Sometimes, I want you to listen to this. The water escapes in form of water
Vapor.
from where? The spongy mesophyll cells. Into where? The substomatal air space. So water has left. So does the concentration increase or decrease? Increase. So when the concentration increases, do you have more salts here or less salts? More salts. Mbona sema less? Si maji ndio imetoka. Na maji ikitoka chumvi zinakuwa ndio nyingi. Kama fa auelewi.
Maji kwa inatoka.
Sometimes
Si temperature imepanda. Maji imetani into vapor. Si ina vaporize inatoka inaingia kwa air spaces hapa. Nini inabaki hapa ndani? Do you think salts can vaporize?
no.
So that means the salts remain. So when the salts remain, do we have a higher concentration here or a low concentration?
Low concentration.
No.
Of what? Of water, right?
Low concentration of water or a high concentration of salts. So what happened? So the cell sap of the spongy mesophyll cells will have a higher concentration than what? The xylem. So does the osmotic pressure of the spongy mesophyll increase or decrease?
Decrease.
The osmotic pressure of the spongy mesophyll, does it increase or decrease? Increase. You know the meaning of osmotic pressure? The pressure that gets brought about by a higher concentration of salts that enables a particular part to absorb water from the surrounding. So that means when the water has vaporized out, the salts in the spongy mesophyll increase. The concentration of the spongy mesophyll increases. So it ends up having what you call a high osmotic pressure. So what happens? the osmotic pressure in the spongy mesophiles will enable it to actually draw water from the xylem through osmosis. Umefahamu nani sometimes? Very good. So that means water is drawn from the xylem vessels into the spongy mesophile. When the water reaches here, what happens? The temperatures rise, it turns into vapor. It is lost to the sponge, to the substomatal air spaces. On reaching here, what happens? The water is actually allowed to actually escape through the stoma, through what we call transpiration. Ana kuna swali? Now,
Mwalimu, stomata iko kwa leaf. Hii
stem. Yes.
Na hiyo ingine cuticle leaf.
Kitu kwa leaf, yeah. Hata iko cuticle pia iko kwa nini? Kwa stem. Kwa mfano
tunasoma tu plant.
Tutafika kwa animals. Animals ndio hii hapa inaanza hapa.
Nataka kupika hivi.
Sasa mkwetu wa patient. Tumalize muende nani utakimbia KDF. Nani uniletee maji. Tukule ndio tuende kumata. Sawa? Very good. Now, where is this water coming from? The water has actually been able to reach in the leaf. Hii maji imetoka wapi? Yenye imepotea?
Imepotea imetoka hapa kwa species of the spongy mesophile.
First tunasema from the xylem into the spongy mesophile. From the spongy mesophile substomatal air spaces into the atmosphere through the stoma. Hii maji ilikuwa imetoka wapi? Kwa root. Si ndio? Tumeangalia imetoka kwa root. Ikaenda mpaka ikafika kwa stem mpaka kwa xylem ya leaf. From xylem ya leaf kwa wapi? Kwa spongy mesophile to substomatal air space. From substomatal air spaces through the stomata into the atmosphere.
Sasa kuna maji yanatoka kwa leaf.
Kwa hivyo maji yanatoka kwa root pia yanatoka tu tena kwa atmosphere. That's how the water moves.
Evaporate inaenda kwa air.
Kwa atmosphere. Yes, fahamed. Very good. And evaporate. Na unatoka wapi base? Unajua kuna base. Evaporate inaenda. Saumu. Salma, ulitoa wapi sauti base? Fahamed. Alafu kageuka. Subhana wa ta'ala. Now, now that means the water now if the water is lost from the xylem to the spongy mesophile, where does it go? To the substomatal air space? Then substomatal air spaces, hii space. Substomatal. Then tumesema spongy mesophile. Isn't it? So the water lost through the leaves comes into the leaf through the xylem in the leaf, which is connected to the connection with the xylem of the stem and that of the root. Is therefore necessary to study the structure and the function of the xylem, because the xylem iko kwa root, iko kwa stem na iko kwa leaf. Now, xylem is a tissue. That means it's made up of many cells. What is a tissue? A group of cells that are coordinated to perform a specific function.
So tunaona tissues yake.
Tunaangalia structure zake na functions zake. Sawa? Now for example, xylem is made up of two main types. We have vessels and tracheates. Look at this. Kumaanisha mtu anasema xylem ni tissue. Si ndio? That means it has so many cells. So if it is a tissue, it has to get made up of cells. That means it can be of how many types?
2.
1 vessels. 2 tracheates. Vessels and tracheates. A plant can either have vessels or another plant can have megacerica. It can have vessels or it can have what? Or it can have bones. Kuna plant iko na bones. Which plant has bones? Oh. So, bones. Now, if a plant has vessels and tracheates, we shall say it as what we call xylem tissue. Now, tunaanza na vessels. Ndio hizi hapa. The first feature, the vessels are tubular. Vessels are what? Tubular. Unajua maana ya tubular? They look like tubes. So they are tubular and non-living. Tubular and what?
Non-living.
Kumaanisha xylem si living. kumaanisha the cells of xylem are dead. Sawa? Now there's something called cell differentiation. The other thing for cell differentiation is cell specialization. Tulisema the cells are modified to perform specific function. So during differentiation specialization, what happens? The cytoplasm of the cells break down or disintegrate. Ikiwa hivi kumaanisha ilikuwa imeshikana hivi, hapa ina break down, kwa hivyo inakuwa tubular. Unaona? You get the point? So that means the cytoplasm or the inside, because cytoplasm is the space inside the cells, ndio? So that means the cytoplasm has to disintegrate, resulting into a hollow tube running from the roots through the stem to the leaves. Kama anaelewa hiyo? Kumaanisha hapa katikati kulikuwa na material ilikuwa imefuni, but wakati specialization ama differentiation ilikuwa inaokaa nini, all that cytoplasm inside this tube had to disintegrate or break down, leaving a hollow tube. You get the point? That hollow tube, isn't it, runs from where? The roots to the leaves. Isn't it? Isn't your takuelezea nini? Now, unajua xylem inaenda juu. So maji inapita ndani yake. Hii wall inafaa ikuwe thick kama thin. Because inapitisha maji mpaka kwa leaf. Thick. Thin. Si ita collapse.
Hapana.
Ja. Look at it, it's like this. Then the water is passing through this. You see what happens? If this wall is not strong enough, it can't withstand the pressure of water. It will collapse. So the wall must be strong. For the wall to be strong, it is thickened. It is what? Thickened by a substance called lignin. Lignin. Polysaccharide. Very good. Sawa sometimes inaitwa polysaccharide. Kama hujaelewa unauliza sawa, kuliko unyamaze. Oh, very good. So the wall must have what you call what? A deposit of lignin. Through a process called lignification. What is lignification? A process where lignin is deposited on the wall of the xylem vessels to offer strength and support. Sawa. Now, that means the walls of these xylem vessels are strengthened. They are able to have what you call support. So can they collapse? They cannot collapse because they have been strengthened. Now these are ways in which lignin gets deposited kwa ukuta. One for example ikiwa hivi inaitwa annular. Hii ndio lignin sasa. Unaona hii? This is the way the lignin gets deposited. Hii nayo inaitwa nini? Reticulate. Unaona inakuwa deposited. Hii inaitwa nini? Pitted. Okay? Hii inaitwa nini? Simple spiral and then multiple spiral. Unaona simple ni moja. Lakini multiple inapita ni mingi.
So inaanzia hapa. Inaenda hivi.
Hapana, hii ni njia tofauti. Unasapata kwa plant fulani lignin imedepositiwa hivyo, inaitwa annular. Unaenda kwa mti mwingine imedepositiwa kama reticule, alafu unapata inaitwa pitted.
So unakuuliza ku draw.
Wanaweza kuchora alafu kuulize name the type of lignification. Or name the way in which the lignin has been deposited. You're supposed to say either.
Wanaweza kuuliza which plants use this method.
Wanawezi wewe bado kwa secondary wewe. Ukienda university ndio watakuuliza.
Soma ya plant at university.
No.
Wanaitwa botanists.
Alafu anafanya? Hii najua study of plants.
Anaenda labda anaandikwa kwa agriculture center ama anaandikwa kwa government, ana study mimea, akijua mimea gani serikali inaweza pea watu wapande ndio chakula, ukosefu wa chakula uishe. They only engage in what you call the study of plants. This phone is 90,000. Pana zenza elfu sita na 700. Saffron. It's 90. Very good. Now, so we are saying this is the type of lignification. Annular iko hivyo, reticulate iko hivyo, inaitwa pitted ama bordered iko na nini? Bordered pits.
Inaka droplets.
Droplets. Alafu inaitwa simple spiral. Inaitwa nini? Multiple spiral. Sawa. Nani atasawi?
Na
queen
Reticulate.
Annular. Easy tu.
Peke yake tu, hakuna ingine.
Simba.
Ingine ikikuwa wanakuwa wanaleta labda university, unawaambia out of syllabus na unaanjana nayo. Hizo zinaitwa vessels. So now let me ask a very simple question. Now, do they have bordered pits, the vessels? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Like in pitted. Unaona hii vessels hizi zinasaidia kufanya kitu kinaitwa lateral movement of water. Movement of permitted passage of water in and out of the lumen into the neighboring. Do you know what I'm trying to say here? Kile mlininyima kitabu ni sawa. Tutachora tu hapo. Look at this. Simaji inapita hapa. Because of these bordered pits, the water is allowed to do what? To move into the neighboring, in and out of the lumen. The lumen. Lumen ni katikati ya hiyo xylem.
So inaenda wapi?
Inaenda kwa cells iko neighboring kwa stem. Fahamu? So the water can move in and out of the lumen of the xylem to the neighboring cells because of these bordered pits. Because of the bordered what? Pits. So xylem vessels are a characteristic feature in flowering plants. That means these ones are only found in what? Flowering plants. Plants that have flowers. Green plants. But the plant inaweza kuwa green lakini ina flower. Kama moses.
And the green plants are in flowers. Green plants have flowers.
Umefahamu nani? Umefahamu? Now, tracheids, like vessels, are also modified xylem. Their walls are also lignified. Nafahamu vizuri? Kumaanisha they also have a deposit of lignin. Unaona umesema lignified wall strengthened with bars. The wall is lignified. Kumaanisha there's a deposit of lignin on the walls. Sawa. And nataka kufahamu hivi. The walls are also pitted. Unajua maana pitted? Unaona kama hii. Ziko na nini? Bordered pits. These pitted walls or these bordered pits can also allow what you call the movement of water in and out of the lumen to the neighboring cells. Sawa. Now, unlike the vessels, tracheids have what you call tapering or chisel-shaped ends. Kila mtu anaona hiyo. Kaelewa? What have I said? Kuna hapa chisel end kweli. But these have what you call a tapering or chisel end what? Parts. Chisel-shaped ends. Isn't it? And the walls, are they perforated or not perforated? Perforated. Are these walls all perforated?
Oh.
Only the bordered pits in the pitted what? Lignification. Kama mtu anaelewa hivyo? The perforations of the side walls allow what? Lateral movement of water to cells surrounding the xylem. Now I want to ask a very simple question. Between this and this, which ones are efficient in conducting water up the stem? These ones. Why? Because these ones have more perforations. Yani maji kitambo ikuji ifike huku, nyingi itakuwa imebaki wapi kwa stem? Kwa stem.
Data
Hii tu peke yake aje. Lakini yote inapeleka direction, maji yote inafika wapi? Kwa leaf. Lakini hapa iko na more perforation. So the water moves laterally to the.
These don't even slide up.
But hizi unajua unasema
hii na hizi.
Hizi tatu peke yake lakini ziko sawa. Umeelewa?
Hizi zingine zinapeleka directly. But this one.
Unapata maji inaenda to the neighboring cells or water move in and out of the
So unaweza kuuliza what structure?
So nafaa ueleze vile tumeeleza. One, they are also lignified or they have walls of lignin. Tunasema tracheids are also examples of xylem tissue. They have what you call tapering or chisel shaped ends. Tumesema their walls are perforated or pitted to allow lateral movement of water. Sawa. Umeelewa? Na tumesema nini? They are less efficient in conducting what? Water. Isn't it? Now apart from conducting water and mineral salts, they also act as strengthening tissue. Unajua ni kwa nini? Lignin inakuwa deposited, zinakuwa strong, ziko kwa stem. They make the stem to become stronger. The stem can now be able to support the leaves and the flowers. Unafahamu? Very good. Now we want to see the forces involved in transportation of water and mineral salts. Nani kuna swali? Na tulisema hizi zinapatikana wapi xylem? Flowering plants. Si nilisema hivyo? Hizi zinapatikana wapi? Pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperm.
Flowering.
Hapana. Angalia hapa. Pteridophyte ni kama mlisoma hizi mitu primary. Ni kama mosses and liverworts.
Hii tumesoma lakini hii tunaisikia.
Hii iko form 3 kwa topic inaitwa classification 2. Classification 2. Haya. So tumesema mosses and liverworts. Now, tumesema pia zinapatikana kwa gymnosperms. Wacha nikwambie mwanafunzi, kuna divisions ngapi za plants? 3. Kuna gymnos, yani kuna pteridophyta. Okay? Then you have what you call bryophyta. Alafu kuna spermatophyta. How many divisions of plants? 3. Pteridophyta iko na kama examples kama gani? Fern plant na hostel. Bryophyta example mosses. And what? Liverworts.
Green.
They are all just green. Spermatophyta kuna divisions mbili. Kuna spermatophyta na angiospermatophyta. Nataka usikize vizuri sana. Xylem vessels anapatikana wapi? Flowering plant. Na flowering plants kategoria yake inaitwa angiospermatophyta. Sawa sawa? Angio. Lakini tracheids zinapatikana wapi? Zinapatikana kwa one pteridophyta. Kama wapi? Kwa fern and hostel. 2 tracheids zinapatikana wapi? Gymnospermatophyta. Which is a sub branch of what? Spermatophyta.
Ile tunafundishwa.
Mtafundishwa form 3.
Yote.
Ni ngumu mama.
Ni rahisi sana, si ngumu. Ni rahisi labda ni ngumu labda kwako. Ni rahisi sana. Unajua kuweza state one difference between xylem vessels and what? Tracheids. In relation to what? Where they are found. Tumesema xylem vessels are found where?
Are found in the flowering plants.
In the flowering plants. What about tracheids? They are found where? In pteridophyta. Hapana, unasema ferns and hostels.
Hizo sio green na flowering.
Tunasema they are found in mosses and hostels.
Not mosses, say ferns and
hostels.
Yes. Number 2, they are found where? In the gymnosperms. In the what? Gymnosperms.
This one.
Yes. In type of lignification.
I mean this one. This is not funny.
Tumesema xylem vessels zinapatikana flowering plants peke yake. Fahamu. Na flowering plants zinaitwa angiosperms. Sawa sawa.
Hii inaweza patikana even flowering.
Hii inaweza pia patikana, tunaona tumesema angiosperm pia. So inapatikana kwa angiosperm flowering, inapatikana kwa gymnosperm non flowering, na pteridophyte non flowering. Kuna swali? Very good. Now, forces involved in transportation of water and mineral salts. Wajua, acha nikwambie, maji na chumvi ndio zipande ziende zifike kwa stem, zifike kwa leaves. Haziendi tu hivyo kienyeji eti tupande juu chumvi na maji tuende. Hapana. There must be forces which allow this water and mineral salts to move above the stem. Sawa. Sasa look, sitataka usikize vizuri. As the water evaporates from the plants, do you absorb more or less from the roots to replace the lost water? This forms what we call a continuous stream of water. Angalia, inatoka inaabsorbiwa, so there's what we call a continuous flow of water from the soil to the roots to the stem to the leaves up into the atmosphere. That forms what we call a continuous flow of water. That continuous flow of water is called transpiration stream. So just stream inaendanga tu inaendelea. So that forms what is called a continuous flow of water, known as what? Transpiration stream. Okay? So transpiration stream carries water and mineral salts from where? The roots to the leaves, isn't it? Now, what are the forces responsible behind the flow of water? Cohesion and adhesion forces. 2, Capillarity. 3, root pre.
Transpiration.
Then transpiration pull. Ni hata mmesoma hizi kumbe si ndio? Hamjasoma? Mmesoma mara ya kwanza na ulizijuaje? Guesswork. Ama ni kukodoa? Cohesion.
Ndiko hapa.
Si ndio hii?
Siko nimeona tu nimesema. Wallahi maki. Nimeona tu hizi.
Tutajua kama nadanganya, tuendelee si ndio? Kwa sababu ni mingi. So let's say the transpiration pull. Unajua maana pull? Enda angalia siku moja
Pull.
ukate stem kar. Utapata hata ukishakata hivyo friction. Nani alikuroga?
Friction na kwanga hivyo.
Kai.
Frictional force.
Inafanya nini?
Bull and bush.
Bull and bush.
Yeah.
Nani, let me tell you nani anaitwa nani? Salma. There's no friction in trees. Muluya. There's no friction in trees. Sawa. Trees hazina friction. So we have said number 1 is cohesion and adhesion forces. Number 2, capillarity. Number 3, root pre. Number 4, transpiration pull. Friction force ubaki tunayo peke yako. Now, look at this. What happens to the water? The water evaporates from the spongy mesophyll cells into the substromatal air spaces. Now, does their cell size becomes more concentrated or less concentrated? More concentrated. They draw in water from the adjacent cells. So this change increases the osmotic pressure of the spongy mesophyll. Nataka niulize, when the water vapor evaporates from the spongy mesophyll cells into the substromatal air spaces, does the osmotic pressure of the spongy mesophyll increase or decrease? Increase.
Yeah.
Maji imetoka kwa spongy mesophyll form water imeenda kwa substromatal air spaces. Kwa hiyo spongy mesophyll tunabaki na maji mingi ama maji kidogo?
Maji kidogo.
Chumvi ni mingi ama kidogo?
Mingi.
So the osmotic pressure higher or lower? Higher. When an environment has more salts than water, the osmotic pressure becomes high.
Diffusion.
Diffusion tumesema from low to high? To high. Hapana. From high to low. From high to low. So? Now, as a result, water flows into these spongy mesophyll cells from the surrounding cells. Which cells are these? The xylem vessels within the leaf. Water molecules move from the xylem vessels into the spongy mesophyll. Because tayari imepoteza nyingine imeenda kwa substromatal. Kwa hivyo inaenda kwa hiyo spongy mesophyll replace ambayo imepotea. Sasa, because you said as the water vapor evaporates from the spongy mesophyll into the substromatal air spaces, what happens? The amount of water in the spongy mesophyll reduces, but the salts increase. When the salts increase, the osmotic pressure increases. So these spongy mesophills with a high osmotic pressure, having more salts, will absorb water from the xylem vessels through osmosis. Unafahamu vizuri? Now, these developments create a pool. Like maji inatoka inaingia kwa spongy mesophyll substromatal air spaces stomata. Kwa hivyo xylem vessels inapokuwa na maji kidogo inavuta maji kutoka kwa stem. These movements developments create a pull or suction force that pull a stream of water from the xylem vessels in the stem and roots. Kwa nini? Kwa leaves imepotea. This force is referred to as what? Transpiration pull. A suction or force that pulls water from the xylem vessels in the roots and the xylem vessels in the stem, so that water can get drawn into the leaves to replace the lost water through transpiration. So this force will partially maintain a continuous column of water flowing from the roots to the stem to the leaves. Sawa. Cohesion and adhesion forces. Angalia hapa vizuri. Hata unasema wewe mwalimu kutuelezea ni nini? Si kila mtu anaelewa hii. Wamechukua tu kitu akaweka hapa alafu akamagnify. Sawa?
Mimi ameweka huko.
Hii
moja
ndio hiyo. So hii ilikuwa hii part wakaikata wakaiweka hapa, si ndio? Alafu akachukua karuti haya kama wakamagnify ndio haka sasa. Unaona hata penye umeonyesha. Fahamu, imagine.
Hata hii inaenda kwa
You use what you call a
hii inakuwa-
microscope.
hii. Zinaendelea tu.
Wewe unajuanga sana, tuendelee. Umesoma mpaka huko mwisho tayari umejua zinaendelea.
Chapter kusoma forces tunaacha huko.
Tusome alafu tuache.
Bado tukimaliza forces.
Alafu tuache.
Tusome.
Tuachie wapi? Tuachie hapa. Nilijua tu. Hata mimi pia njaa inaniuma. Kwani wewe chakula pia? Vumilia. Sometimes. Umesema when sometimes. Kwa hiyo hata sometimes unaweza kula, sometimes usikule. Now, look at this. Let's hope this is actually xylem. In the state, we have water molecules and we have the wall, isn't it? What happens? What is a cohesion force? A force that causes attraction between like molecules. So
Molecules of the same
type or same kind. So that means the water molecules attract each other. So as they attract each other, they move up the stem. Ona kako hapa kanashika mwingine, tunashikana kai. Kanashika mwingine hivyo tukienda. So kwa water molecule ikikuwa hapa, haka na attract huyu. Kakikuwa hapa kana attract. So the attraction of like molecules is called cohesion. That also makes the water molecules to move up the stem. So that means water molecules stick to each other or stick together. And this force can keep the water molecules up the stem, isn't it? But now there's something called adhesion, isn't it?
force between
Unlike
molecules of
molecules
different-
or molecules of different types. That means between the water molecule and the wall of the what? The xylem, isn't it? Now the water molecules are attracted to the wall of the xylem through what you call adhesion force, isn't it? Now the cohesion adhesion forces are very, very important in maintaining what you call a continuous flow of water or a thin column, isn't it? And this makes the water to move up the stem.
So that every plant has its own force.
No, all plants have all these things.
All of them.
Yeah, whether in flowering, whether in non-flowering. Capillarity. Now let's assume you have what you call an open-ended tube, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Capillarity tulikuwa tunaita soil.
Unajua ile mchanga ile maji kumove up the soil. Hii ni capillarity sasa hapa ya nini ya form 2. Hii ni ya primary. Ya primary na hii ni tofauti.
Rudi primary.
Rudi primary. Kwa hivyo rudisha akili primary. Sawa, Abian? Very good. Now, capillarity. In an open-ended tube, let's take this one as an example. CEO anapika phone calls kwa office. Now, in an open-ended tube, isn't it? You can, that's why unaona for example kwa mfano tube wanainsert kwa mercury wakimeasure atmospheric pressure. Mercury ina move up the tube, isn't it? So if an open-ended tube kumaanisha iko open juu na chini. Open-ended tube is placed vertically with one end immersed in water. The liquid will rise up the tube up to a certain column, isn't it? Balancing the attraction forces operating within the water molecules. So the narrower the tube, the higher the liquid will rise. The wider the tube, the lower the liquid will rise. Tunaelewa vizuri? Wanasema sometimes maji ikiwa kwa xylem ina move up to 0.01 mm in diameter. Alafu ina move up a stem to a particular height of about 3 meters. Kumaanisha xylem iko 0.01 watt in diameter. Na kama maji ina move up the xylem ina move up to how many meters?
3.
Hiyo ni kama move up the stem. Imagine unapima rula moja, ya pili. Imefika kwa leaves.
Hii ni 2 meter.
2 meter 1 2. Kwa hivyo hii ni kama unaongeza ingine wapi? Juu.
1 2.
Then 3. That's 3 meters. Imagine 3 meters. So if the xylem is 0.1 millimeter, the water can move up the xylem up to 3 meters. Itakuwa imefika kwa leaves, ndio? Hata kuna stem zenye zifika hata kuna miti yenye ifika hata 3 meters, ndio? Maybe 1.2 2 point something.
Zinafika 6.
Ingine hata inafika 6 meters, yeah. Kumbe unazijua zile za karesa, si ndio? Very good. Very good. Now, when the xylem vessels are narrower, the water moves to a greater height, reaching the leaves. That means capillarity is very important, isn't it? To allow the water molecules to move up the stem. Capillarity can only work if there's no air trapped. Unajua kwa nini? Hewa ikitrapiwa hapa ina exert pressure. So maji yes panda. The air trapped within the xylem vessel can exert what we call atmospheric pressure on the water. So the water won't move up the stem. Very good. Allah atusaidie. Tujue chenye tunasema na tuelewe, si ndio? The last one is called root pressure. Now, assuming you have this stem of a plant, hii ni roots, isn't it? Alafu plant imeenda hivyo, si ndio? Alafu nikuja nikate hapa na nikate hapa. What can you see? So if the stem is cut above the soil level, it's observed that the cell sap continues to exude. Like umekata umetoa, umebaki na hii nini kigingi. Utapata bado maji inatoka. Still the water can still be able to get seen exuding from the cut surface of the stump. Hii inaitwa tree stump. Sisi tulikuwa shuleni ukikosa wanakuambia ungoe hii mzizi mpaka utoe. Ungoe itoke.
Si rahisi.
Wana jida gani? Ni rahisi. Mti kubwa, angalia. Iko hivi.
Zile za shule zetu. Zile za shule.
Na kubwa, alafu anakata hapa. Hii na alafu anakuambia ungoe sasa hii itoke yote na mizizi yote. Unaweza?
Hapa.
Unasema ni rahisi. Ni ngumu, si ndio?
Hajaenda farm.
Ni kukaa tu 2J dining hall, 2J dining hall, library, parade, staff room, the dining hall, assembly hall, kitchen, dining hall, kukula, 2J, maybe 2P, kwenda kuchukua tu exercise book, 2 black, kuchukua labda textbook. Unaendaka kwa farm? Do you see the size of the trees? Can you uproot them? We are now strong. Now, so that means you can still see the liquid exuding. What does that tell you? This shows that there is a force in the roots. There is a force in the roots that pushes water up the stem. This force is known as what? Root pressure. Yani angalia, ulikata stem ukatoa tayari, but unaona bado maji inatoka. That means there is
so much kama umekata hiyo kitu yote.
So umekata, si ni mti ndio umekata hapa. Unaona bado maji inatoka?
Unaona?
Kwa hapo juu ya stem hapo, hiyo penye umekata. That means there's a pressure coming from the roots.